Hi everyone, and welcome to Solving Quadratic Equations. If you watched the video on factoring quadratics, this should look pretty familiar to you. Normally when you're given a quadratic to solve, you'll actually have to factor it first yourself, but I figured that since we'd already done the factoring for this one, we might as well continue on with it and just go ahead and solve it here, okay? So when you were originally given this to factor, it was just this part of it, okay? It didn't equal anything. You were just given x squared plus 7x minus 8, right? And it said factor this, okay? But what you will see when it asks you to solve is you'll see this, but it will equal 0, okay? We'll do another example a little bit later on about what to do when it doesn't equal 0. But for right now, we'll just look at this most simple case right here, okay? And the big thing that we really want to think about here, there are kind of two major things with solving quadratics, is that anything times 0 is going to equal 0. So let's just make up a variable. K is a good one that we haven't used. And if we just multiply that times 0, little dot there, multiply it times 0, that's going to equal 0. Similarly, we could say that 0 times k also equals 0. But the big thing is that if you multiply anything by 0, you're going to get 0 no matter what. Okay, so that's the first big thing. And then the second big thing that we've got to combine with it is that when we factor a quadratic, what we have are two things multiplied by each other, okay? So the way that we would get this to equal 0 is if one of the things that we're multiplying, right, one of the things that we're multiplying is 0, okay? So let's look at what that means. First, let's look at what are the two things that we are actually multiplying, okay? So the first is this right here, right? We have x minus 1. That's one thing that we're multiplying. And then the other thing that we are multiplying is this one right here, that x plus 8. Okay, those are the two things that we are multiplying together to get this quadratic here. All right, so let's look at what we're going to do with these, okay? So here, remember, one of these has to equal 0, right? So let's just set this one equal to 0, right? We would add 1 to both sides, and we'd end up with x equals 1, okay? So if x equaled 1, then this would be 0, right? This right here, that would be 0, and we have 0 times whatever, which we said down here, anything times 0 is going to equal 0, okay? So that would work. That would make this equal 0 if x is 1. Okay, but we could also have this equal to 0, right? So we'd have equals 0, we'd subtract 8 from both sides, and we get that x equals negative 8. Okay, so we're going to have two answers, because we could either have 1 in here for the x and get 1 minus 1, that would give us 0, and so 0 times x plus 8 is 0, or we could have a negative 8 here, we could plug in negative 8, and we would have x minus 1 times negative 8 plus 8, which of course a negative 8 plus 8 would also give us 0, right? So when we solve this, it's going to have two answers, and we're going to say that x equals 1 comma negative 8. And in this case, the comma isn't for a point. Sometimes the comma shows a point, and this time the comma is not a point. It just shows that there's more than one thing that x equals. And there is our solved equation, right? So we would factor this, we take each of the factors, set them equal to 0, and those give us our two answers.